Super Rugby Pacific round one is in the bag. That is done and dusted. And my oh my, what a round it was. Every week, I'm going to be talking to you guys on a Sunday or after the last game of the weekend and just do a little wrap of all the results. And I'm also going to be honing down onto one specific area of a game that I can show you some video analysis on and tell you and walk you through what I'm seeing in these games. Usually these are real-time reflections, and then I'll bring them to you as a little bit of a video analysis piece. So we're just going to go through the weekend really quickly, and then I'll hone in onto the analysis piece and the video analysis, and that'll be on the other side of this. We saw that in the Ireland test, we saw that in the England test. It was a really tight game, and so I'll whack it up there it is. Now there's a little bit of chat about the fact that if you're needing to get creative, like, get subscribe, you know the rest. Crusaders v Hurricanes was a great way to open the weekend. It was a really, really tight contest until it wasn't really. The Crusaders definitely didn't help themselves by Scott Barrett getting a yellow card early, but I think that few people would have expected, and very few people did pick him in their fantasy team. That is the reserve halfback, Preston, who scored a hat-trick on his Crusaders debut, I believe. And that really set the tone of the belief, I think, in the Crusaders for themselves. The pack played pretty well. They managed to get some ascendancy in certain parts of the game, but I think that ultimately it was the patience and calm of players like Will Jordan, Sever Reese, and also their captain David Havili, who really be able to take command and take control of that game. It can be congratulations to James Conner, who got his Crusaders debut. He is added to and definitely helped out with that result, so I'm really happy for him. I think the Crusaders and Rob Penny can especially breathe a big breath of relief, because they've got a win on the board, and it looks like it's going to be a vastly different season, much to the peril of the rest of the teams in the competition for the Crusaders in 2025. Moving down onto the next game, there was the Waratahs versus the Highlanders, which will be the game that I'm going to be highlighting with my analysis just after I run through the rest of the games. But overall, the Waratahs, they looked like not a very cohesive unit to begin with. Let's just say that a lot of their Wallabies players were playing because Dan McKellar wanted to get he's trying to build as much cohesion in a short period of time. He has said on several occasions that he would have liked another trial, but the short run into Super Rugby at the start of the year and after Christmas just doesn't allow for that. I think overall the Highlanders actually played a better brand of rugby and definitely played to their strengths a lot more. They had their powerful centers, Timothy Tamatauanawai and Talia in the centers, who got them over the gain line repeatedly, and they had dangerous wingers to finish with a decent, inexperienced halfback pairing there to run the ship. The Waratahs did get some good dominance at set piece, especially at scrum time. Taniela Tupou, their kicking strategy, which is what I'll be highlighting in the video at least, was definitely under critique in the first half. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But big congrats to Joseph Akuso Suali'i, and probably the man that everyone wants to really pat on the back, Siosifa Amone, the prop who scored the double to secure the game. So well done, Siosifa, on that one. It's obviously not his Super Rugby debut, it's just his debut for the Waratahs. He has played before for the Western Force before moving this year to the Waratahs. Moving on to the Drua and Brumbies, it was 32 degrees when in Suva when I checked the weather during the game, and it was probably 1,000,000,000% humidity. So the Fijians definitely made the best out of those conditions. They played test match rugby. Caleb Muntz had a slow build into the game, but eventually he really got his team moving forward and into the right parts of the field, and that's definitely something that Glenn Jackson, their new head coach, has focused on, making sure that they're winning the territory battles and playing in the right parts of the field. The Brumbies were definitely feeling the contact and the heat out there, because the Fijian Drewers were smoking Brumbies players left, right, and centre throughout the entire game. And I think that really started creeping into the mindset of some of the ball players and some of the backs, especially for the Brumbies. So that's something that Stephen Larkham will want to see, because they will play equally as physical opponents moving forward, and Larkham can't have his big ball players taking backward steps. I will jump in here and say that Noel Olesio had a very mixed game, but defense was not one thing that you can critique of him for. He defended really admirably and made most of his tackles actually on a lot of the big forwards and key ball runners for Fiji. So he cooked really well for line, but his direction around the field was good, but his actual ball in hand play, he made a lot of mistakes and dropped balls. So it's probably a game that he'll want to rectify moving forward. I think that the Brumbies overall just managed to play their systems better. And unlike the Waratahs, the Brumbies and Stephen Larkham trusted in the boys that had done the majority of the preseason together. And that cohesion and knowing where to be when really showed. And I think that was the big difference between the Brumbies and the Drua in the end. That the Brumbies, like they are always every season, have just been really well drilled. And that won out in the end. Moving on to the Blues and the Chiefs. This was another instance where Vern Cotter probably trusted in his All Blacks, who have just returned in camp 3-4 weeks, a little bit too much, whereas the Chiefs ran a very non-big name side for the most part and played a lot of their All Blacks on the bench, specifically Tupou Vaa'i and Cortez Ratima. But that really won out in the end because their cohesion and fitness, because of all the boys that have been in preseason were playing, that really showed out. And that's why the Chiefs and the Blues game had the biggest difference in score, because the Chiefs managed to pull away in the end. And that was a courtesy of Damien McKenzie being on an absolute fire, as well as his forward pack just rolling up their sleeves and doing the hard yards. A couple of tough calls going either way, and the try saver on Mark Tahlia by Cortez Ratima in the second half. That was an absolute highlight of the weekend. But I think the Chiefs will power on from this and trust in their system, and Clayton McMillan will trust in his wider squad, which will be great for them. And I think the Blues will go back to the drawing board just a little bit more on selections. Anything else apart from that, their All Blacks will work into the season and they'll be a threat moving forward. To the final game of the weekend, Western Force v Moana. What an absolute way to finish the weekend with a in the red 83rd, 4th minute winning try by Ben Donaldson to run away from 60 metres out-ish. How the Western Force played in the last 3 minutes of that game in the red is how they should have played for the rest of the 80. They were their own worst enemy, whilst Moana Pacifica were guided around the field really well by Garden Bishop at number 10. He could do no wrong. He got a try assist off the knee. He kicked the ball into Marley Pierce's knee, ricochets, and that was Patafilo's try, I'm pretty sure. Drops a casual drop goal as well. Made lots of tackles and a tip tackle on Ben Donaldson when he made a break to save that situation, because it probably would have been a definite try, because Ben Donaldson had, I think it was Harry Potter on his outside. And also Garden Basham scores a try because he managed to skip away from Ben Donaldson, and we saw how much Ben Donaldson had toe. So that was an impressive try by Garden Basham. I think the main thing that the Western Force need to worry about is the speed at which the Moana managed to get their ball out. I mean, they were about 2 seconds speed, ruck speed on average, just because Tazano couldn't get onto the ball and the cleaners were so efficient and their connection was so good. And they were coming in with such ferocity, so the Western Force players just seemed to stand off and then and just try to set in the line. But I think that moving forward, the Western Force will realise that they definitely need to compete harder on the ground in the tackle and also over the breakdown and be able to get people through that ruck, because otherwise they are going to get absolute a shitload of points put on them, excuse my French. Conceding 44 points against Moana in round one, not ideal for the Western Force, so defence will have to work on both sides. Well done to Violini Akawasi for getting them over the advantage line, and Dylan Peach for the backs. Well done. Without you and Akawasi, I don't know if they would have won that game necessarily or been in that game to that extent. So well done. Big shout out to Tizano and Nick Dolly as well, because they seem to hold the scrum up respectively well when they were on. That is another key area Simon Cronwell is going to fix. They've already lost Harry Johnson-Home and Harry Hooper for this season due to knee injuries. I believe they're both ACLs. They may not be, but I think that's the case. Simon Cron is going to have to fix that area of the game really quick, because that almost cost them the entire game, as well as some time in the sin bin, which didn't help their case at all. So working on that. You can't win games without scrums. This is an exception. That needs to be fixed. Now heading into the analysis part. So what we're seeing here is that Jake Gordon kicks the box kick up. And as you can see, there's only 3 line chasers on the right covering 15 meters. And this mix-up meant that there was no one necessarily staring at the ball player to be able to then go in and then, if there's a rebound, nail that player. So if we rewind this, So once this ruck is set up, you've got Dave Parecki, Rob Leota, a hooker and a number 6, as well as Joseph Akuso Suali'i. So Suali'i goes up. The only thing that Leota should be watching here is to nail the person who comes down with the ball if it's not one of his own, or then to clean out. That is just a great piece of skill on the end of that, where he just scores and just beats Andrew Kellaway on the end. Great try. But the way that they set that up, there's just a bit of lack of priority and a lack of understanding, or maybe just getting across the detail about what they want to do when a kick like that is put up in the 15-meter channel. If we fast forward to the 23rd minute, so here we see again, it's pretty much the exact same position. Jake Gordon chucks the ball in one run infield to then be able to get the angle to be able to box kick well. He's only got Lalakai Feketi and Andrew Kellaway. Lalakai Feketi should only be worrying about where this ball is going to go. But instead, he runs past him, and that opened the gap up. And there's almost a second try here. Had that been run a little bit differently, they would have scored again. Great covering tackle from Joseph Akuso Suali'i. Amatosero scrambles well there, and then this becomes a bit of a mess. But the point being is that the chase lines are completely wrong, and who is prioritizing who in this instance is also landing them in a great deal of trouble. If we go back one more time, so the Waratahs win this ball. The ref calls the number 9 of the Highlanders out. Jake Gordon runs a ball, wants a pod inside so that he gets a better angle on this kick. You've got 4 forwards in this ruck here. You've got Charlie Gamble, Hugh Sinclair, Dave Parecki, and Laney Gleeson, and you've only got 2 players, Lalakai Feketi and Andrew Kellaway, to cover 15 meters of space. And then you've got Jake Gordon chasing his own kick. It's just way too much space and a lack of players in that space to be able to cover this effectively and to be able to prevent a 50-meter break or a 40-meter break like this. The All Blacks do it really well with Artie Sevilla or another back rower, and even Cody Taylor, who's quite rapid, just sits back and creates a safety net and nails whoever comes down with that ball if it's not their own player. So that's the kind of video analysis graphics that I'll be doing, an analysis for you guys week in, week out on a specific moment of the game. I just picked the Waratahs game because that's the thing. I went to that game, and that's the thing that I saw. And the kick chase throughout the game was actually generally pretty poor as well. You've got a kick by Walton who puts up a bomb in the 17th minute, 17:30, I think it is. And that also is the chase line is not great because no one's there to... They're not going up to catch the ball sometimes, they're going up just to bat it back. But if you don't have a set structure or a structure that everyone is across to be able to collect that bat back by the player, then all of a sudden you're losing a lot of that potency, and then that's really just becoming a 50-50 ball and a poor tactic as opposed to retaining the ball and building phases. So that's something that Dan McKellar will definitely want to touch on. He did touch on it in the halftime break, and it definitely improved after halftime with less kicking. But that's the wrap for the weekend. It was an absolute class weekend for the first weekend of Super Rugby Pacific Round 1. I hope that the rest of the weekends are like this. Waratahs go into a bye. The Reds play Moana Pacifica in Brisbane, so that's their first game of the season. If the Reds win, then we'll have one win for all the Australian teams. And if Moana win, then they're on the board and they are going to be going home, playing 2 home games in New Zealand. I can't remember if they're exactly playing 2 at home in Auckland. They definitely have 1 home game, but that means that they're going to get on the scoreboard as well. So I'm stoked that it's back, and I can't wait for next weekend already, but it's Sunday, so I've got to wait some more days. But until then, please enjoy yourselves. Like, subscribe, please, guys. It really helped me reach more rugby lovers like yourself, and then we can continue to spread the good word of rugby. So until we see each other again on here with another video later in the week, take care.